All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Event Trader here. Just noting we are getting a quick 10-point drop in the S&P. Talked about that being a pretty good entry spot just a few minutes ago. But like I said, I wasn't taking the trade because I'm about to step into the booth here with options trader Brandon Mars. So, Brandon, how are you doing today?
Well, I feel bad now. I got to keep you in diamonds and furs, and I'm keeping you from good trades. So,
I appreciate that, man. I'll expect it in the mail. I'll keep an eye out for it. Just send it to the triangle, right?
yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, we had that nice little bounce reversal around the 59.27 area. Got that run up to 59.90 and just kind of ran out of steam. And now that by the dip crowd being tested here. So, first, let's talk a little bit about the intraday action. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that. And then we'll kind of fan out a little bit and talk about the broader market activity that we've seen since the last time we met.
Yeah, so last couple sessions, I know we missed a week here and there, but I had mentioned I was leaning to the bearish side of things, and kind of got that these last few days, that's for sure. So I don't know. I just think personally, I think too many things just kind of started to pile up, and as we'll get more into the segment, some of the stuff going on in the options world, I think definitely coming into play here. And for myself right now, I'm in full on market maker conspiracy mode as we get into the big NVIDIA earnings. So trying to figure out which way they're gonna take us after that report.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your theory here on the market makers then?
All right. Well, get get your aluminum foil out. So, I'm kind of the mind frame that if we were to continue to get a bounce for the rest of the day and into tomorrow, that we'd probably be looking to short Nvidia. So I'm kind of thinking, a little bit of the opposite right now of what will happen. So, if we were to roll back over today, which we're kind of doing right now, you'd be looking at three. Well, actually, you'd really have like a three black crows pattern on the NQs, so that wouldn't be great for technical purposes. But then you'd be looking at a pretty nice little dip lower for several days now, and that would kind of make me want to lean towards the call side. But as we've talked about many times, I'm not going to play the earnings no matter what, so I guess I kind of just don't care what happens at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, that's always an easier way to look at it, right? I mean, just kind of wait for those pitches that you want to hit and swing at rather than try to catch that NVIDIA fastball coming down with a lot of volatility, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just one other thought I just had as I was looking at a few charts. Overall, you are starting to see a lot of hammer type candles forming on a lot of the dailies on some of the big names like, Google. I think there was one on Meta. I haven't looked in the last hour, so they might have changed a little bit with this little dip. But, it's at least feeling like a little bit of a, short term bounce would be due. And I don't know. I would just again, I have conspiracy theories when it comes to earnings where if we got the bounce today and we kind of moved higher again, that it'd be the perfect opportunity for them to roll us over off the Nvidia report.
Yeah, yeah, no, that would definitely set it up nicely there, right? So, and we will break down the NVIDIA report a little bit more in depth here, the options activity going on around it as part of our segment. But so I guess then, Brandon, are there any levels that you have in your mind that you're kind of watching for, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, on the NQs, we're not too far off from the 20-day on the weekly. So that's at like 21278. So that's kind of my,
Off the
you know,
continuous you're going off of here?
yeah, I'm off the
Yeah.
continuous. We actually did just touch that level, and then that's kind of, I think, what might have prompted that little rollover. Again, probably some other factors, but we did kind of go right up to that level and rolled over. So that's kind of my, I guess, my line in the sand at the moment.
All right, so I got that myself at 21,299. Is that where you're showing?
I am
On the
on.
That's on the continuous.
I got it on Thinkorswim at 21278.
Okay, so little bit of a difference there, but what's 20 points in the Nasdaq among friends, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's
So
one tick these days, right?
yeah, we're given the volatility that we tend to see, right? So okay, so we'll continue to track that playing out. Again, getting a bit of a roll at the moment. It's just about nearly 100 points off the highs here in the Nasdaq at the moment, off the afternoon highs, that is. So again, uh, 20 points is being seen in pretty easily these days. So that's the level that you want to have on your radar, though, that 21,275 to call it 21,300 there. All right, Brandon. Any of the other indices kind of catching your attention at all, or?
Be honest with you, I haven't looked at the others quite as closely, just with NVIDIA coming up. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have something similar, I guess, on the S&P, the weekly at the 5995 area. So, again, call it an even six to keep it simple. Yeah, I mean, but mainly kind of looking at the NASDAQ just due to good old NVIDIA.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, a lot of eyeballs are going to be on NVIDIA, and we'll talk about that. But a few other names that have been on your radar here that we want to highlight. One being Zoetis ZTS, the animal pharmaceutical play here. What's catching your attention here in ZTS, and tell me what time frame you want me to put the chart on.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the daily right now.
Okay, that's what I got up.
Yeah, we trade a couple messages in the chat room about this one. Bird flu name. A little bit out of the ordinary for me, but it just kind of seems to be a situation that's not necessarily getting any better. And, not trying to go into what's going on in DC right now, but it does sound like they kind of fired a lot of people that are supposed to be overseeing the potential solutions. So, having a bunch of people on board for something like this doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get it fixed, but it doesn't necessarily help to not have eyes on the problem either. So, they got that conditional approval for bird flu. From what I've read, it doesn't mean they're selling it or anything like that. But then what caught my attention is there was some options activity on it recently, calls in particular. And yeah, I mean, you've seen that really nice move off that base from post earnings. So, been performing really well, but kind of sitting right at that 50 and 20 day. So I was expecting a little bit more resistance there with kind of the two technical factors, but it's kind of just sitting there. It's holding pretty strong at 168 right now, but if it could work its way through those, then you kind of got that gap coming up from let's see here, February 12th, which I believe was their earnings. So yeah, it's not the most exciting trader. It's just kind of sitting there floating along right now, but still looking strong in a down market.
Okay, so what are some of the moves that you'd like to see that would force you into action here?
I mean, it's kind of really just holding up right around this level where it's at. I mean, in theory, it could almost kind of create like a ascending triangle on the day. If it can just kind of hold up and close above the 50 and the 20, I think it would show that, continued strength to potentially get up to that gap. This is probably a little bit of a headline play too. So, I know the administration's supposed to be talking about kind of some next steps and new plans that they have to take care of this problem. And, obviously, I think this trade would be a little contingent upon the fact that they get some sort of mention or some sort of discussion around using a vaccine to solve the problem.
Okay, so ZTS on the radar. Another one that you got on the radar, Old Faithful for you, Alphabet. We're going off the L's, the GOOGL, as you can see here, just tested the 200-day moving average on the daily chart.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously the market felt a little bit like a falling knife this morning, but you had Google coming in, and yeah, you got that 200-day that you mentioned, and then it also has the gap from December 9th, pretty much at the same level. So, never fun to try and catch a falling knife, but when you've got two, technical factors kind of sitting at the same level, they can, tend to work together, right? So you dip down a little bit below both those levels. Probably not a huge surprise that you'd get a little dip lower. One, just because you usually get that with the games that the market makers play, and two, the market was just kind of weak. So seeing a pretty nice little bounce here though off the lows of the day, and it's kind of continuing to try to grind higher here. So kind of like one of those names I was just mentioning, you kind of got the hammer candle forming on the daily. So, if we see enough of those in the big names, you'd think we'd at least be in store for a little bounce before NVIDIA.
Yeah, and obviously that'll factor in. Do you want to see it recover the yesterday's lows at all today?
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely, in theory, add some buying pressure, right? If you start to put some of those people underwater that were shorting or getting out, create a little bit of FOMO before the Nvidia earnings. So yeah, if you saw that, I mean, I think that would kind of help push it
It
up to
might.
the 180 area.
Okay, there you have it. All right, so we'll be watching for price action in the mega cap names. In fact, let's just take a look at the MGK, Brandon. Just would love your interpretation of this chart. Now, obviously, NVIDIA is involved here. Um, you've got other names like Lilly and stuff as well, in addition to the big cap tech names. But you got any thoughts on this chart in terms of a broader market read through?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of replicating, some of the other charts that we just talked about, right? Like Google, Meta, getting that hammer candle kind of dipping down below that lower Bollinger Band. So, in theory, if you get, when I look at charts, and I see some sort of similar pattern on a 5, 15 hourly, daily chart, when those things start to add up, that's when it kind of solidifies your idea a little bit more. So, again, if we see it on enough of these big names and, a big ETF like this, and in theory, they would work together, but with that big asterisk that we have NVIDIA as the overhang.
Yeah, and just as a reminder from GK, NVIDIA is the third heaviest weighting at 10%. You got Apple at 13, Microsoft at 11 ahead of it. Right behind Amazon, Meta, Tesla, which is obviously having a pretty big pull here. And then the Alphabet Class A shares, the GOOGL. While I got you on, might as well talk a quick Tesla. I know I'm throwing a couple of curveballs at you, Brandon, but um, I just kind of looking at it from a chart perspective. What's your thoughts here on the Tesla chart? You think it's inevitable that we're touching a 200-day moving average at this juncture?
That would be my thought. At this point, because it is Tesla, you do have 4 straight down days. I've talked about this before, but just because it's gone down 4 days doesn't mean it can't go down another four. But once we start to get to 3, 4, 5 days in a row of a particular direction, that's usually when I just say to myself, "Hey, is this maybe due for a bounce?" At least short term. So that's just kind of how I think about it when I look at that. So yeah, I mean, I would think with any sort of bad NVIDIA earnings, a rollover to the 200-day really at this point is just 20 points away. It's not, well, a little bit more, like 25ish, 26. So that's really not that big of a move, but you've kind of
It's
you've
down
got the
27 points today, right? So
yeah. So again, I'm not trying to talk politics here, but there are more and more rumors circulating out there about how people are getting a little angry with him within the administration. So, literally just read the latest article about 20 minutes ago. And, that's obviously what's given Tesla a little bit of a boost here. So, if that does go away, you'd think that the 200-day would come into play. But for me, what I would like to see if I were to short this at this point is I got to imagine with a down 8% after 4 days, it's got the key 300 level there. I got to kind of think in my brain maybe a short squeeze this afternoon. So, for me, what I would ideally like to see if I was going to short it is maybe get that short squeeze the rest of the day, maybe get a gap up in the morning and then short the gap up. Lot of what ifs in that scenario, but just
Sure.
playing an
As with
ideal
any trade,
scenario.
right? As with any trade, Brandon, right?
Yes, exactly. If only had the crystal ball, then I could say for sure.
It would be very helpful, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at the next one here on our list. Taiwan Semi, TSM. Obviously, there was news out about some further potential um, curbs on chips coming from the administration. So we'll be watching for that. TSM, that's coming down, testing the year to date lows, right? 187.66 had been the prior year to date low. It got to 187.46. So fresh mark there. It did bounce off that level. Could be helping provide a little bit of a lift to the markets. But what's your thoughts on Taiwan Semi here, TSM?
Yeah, so Taiwan Semi, as you mentioned, just kind of hitting some of those levels. I think that if I were to do anything on the NVIDIA earnings, again, I'm not doing anything directly on NVIDIA. This might be my potential play. I've just kind of been watching it real time, kind of for the last several trading sessions, and there's definitely been some periods of some pretty aggressive selling. Yeah, you've got kind of the chip export headline. I don't know. Maybe we get tariffs on, Taiwan. A lot of to be determines there. But in theory, if Nvidia had a miss, I would think that Taiwan Semi would get hit pretty hard, just because of the fact that it's such a big client. And kind of similar to that Tesla chart, right? You have that 200-day where if all of a sudden, we just get another huge drop off in tech, that 200-day would seem pretty reasonable to hit. So, and I was taking a look earlier too. Was seeing some slightly elevated put activity this morning. Put call ratio sitting right around 1. Again, you'd think that everything would be sitting around 1, but it's not. AMD's not. I mean, excuse me, Broadcom's not. AMD's not. Nvidia's not. So again, just trying to find kind of where the bearishness is. And again, kind of a similar setup where if I were to do anything at this point, I'm not touching it. But if I maybe got a gap up tomorrow morning, afternoon squeeze, it might be a candidate that I might take a lot of on into the earnings.
All right. So Taiwan Semi on the radar. And then we're going to be switching gears here. We talked a little bit about pet pharma, moving on to big cap tech, and now moving on to a little bit of coffee and Starbucks,
Yes.
which is making a nice little break higher here. Obviously, perhaps anticipation of a pushback from or rebound in China. But what's your thoughts here on Starbucks? Pretty impressive move. Definitely the Brian Nickel um, tailwind going on at the moment.
Yeah, so with Starbucks, and yeah, I was talking about this with airline trader on Friday afternoon. That candle on Friday really started to look like a fake breakout. It just seemed like it was losing a little bit of momentum from the post earnings move higher, and yeah, I think it actually would have been a great trade if it weren't for the news that they were laying people off, which gave the stock a boost. So kind of negated that trade a little bit, but I wanted to talk about it today. It kind of totally shifted on me here. Again, I saw some decent put activity on it yesterday. Was actually seeing that again today, but then if you go over to the intraday chart at about 12:30, it just totally skyrocketed. I haven't seen any news related to it. I will fully admit I've been kind of prepping for this, so I haven't been able to fully look. I didn't see any news on it, but yeah, I mean, it just took off. But yeah, again, it was kind of climbing. I had originally liked the setup, then we got some news, and then I saw the put activity still coming into it. So I thought it was interesting, but yeah, just kind of unfortunately the move in the last hour has sort of shifted that dynamic a little bit.
All right. We'll be watching that, but this has got to be multi-year highs. This is an all-time high, is it? Let's see. No, we have 115.48 back in May of 2023. The all-time high is 126.32 back in July of 21. It must have been when everybody was working at home and just going to Starbucks for their coffee, I guess, right?
I didn't realize it was actually that close to all-time highs again. Just because that dip that it did take recently was pretty ugly, so I thought it had further to go. To be completely honest with you.
That's right about there. So impressive move, especially given how expensive coffee is these days. I would have thought that that would be crimping margins, but again, this is people affording, I think, in my opinion, the Brian Nickel effect in the hopes that China's bounce back because the consumer confidence number and some of the sentiment figures we've seen around the consumers hasn't been strong. One would think that they'd be trading in their Starbucks for a little bit more reasonable Dunkin' Donuts or something. And the other thing that I'd probably point out too is look at Krispy Kreme today. That thing's down 22%. So it'll be interesting to see how Starbucks continues in the coming days and sessions. All right.
I
So
love the fact that the Yankees fan just picked a good old Boston Dunkin' Donuts for that reference. So thank you for that.
I'm a Dunkin' guy. I'm a Dunkin' guy. I'm old school. So um, I think their coffee's better and cheaper.
I don't like Starbucks unless I get one of their kind of like
You're
really
you're an
weirdo
Oregon
drinks with all
guy.
the things in it and stuff. I never go to Starbucks, so I'm kind of like I kind of had the same process or thought process as you. Like you're getting kind of all of these consumer reports and stuff like that. If anything's going to get cut out of your budget, you'd think it would be the $19 coffee that Starbucks is serving you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll be getting some more information on that in the coming weeks, right? So let's watch to see how that plays out. All right, just kind of keeping an eye here on the broader market before we get into our topic of the week. We got the S&P sitting right around 59.83 there. It had dipped down to the 59.77 area, but bouncing back at the moment. Then the Nasdaq, we've got that had that little quick little dip there, bouncing back. So some hammer candles going on there. What do you think of that for the afternoon, Brandon? Before we get into the Nvidia discussion,
Yeah, I mean they're definitely trying to
bit of
buy
a
these
hammer,
dips
right?
now, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. Don't want to give up that ghost too easily. Which at some point it's probably going to get ugly, but when that happens, we will have to see. All right, let's break into NVIDIA here, Brandon, and talk a little bit about that stock. Now, what I will do here is to start off the session, I'll give a quick rundown on the earnings and talk a little bit about what's expected on that front. So, obviously, pretty high expectations going in. Earnings per share, that's projected to come in around 85 cents on revenue of about 38.08 billion. This is according to FactSet, of course. Certainly keeping a close eye out on commentary around DeepSeek. Now, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has addressed the concerns in recent interviews, basically arguing that DeepSeek's actually beneficial for NVIDIA, as he says that its value lies in its post-training inference rather than initial model training. So, that'll be something that we're looking closely at. You could be sure any sort of slowdown, people are going to be worried about that DeepSeek impact that they're seeing. Hyperscaler CapEx commentary, that's certainly been very positive for NVIDIA. Pretty much all the hyperscalers, which of course would be Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta, all provided expense costs that were above expectations during their calls. Now, there was that recent story out about Microsoft being a little bit inundated and having some inventory issues with some of its chips. So we'll see if that is indeed the case. That was based off of a TD Cowen note. Microsoft has refuted those. We'll see. We'll get a better sense of where that stance lies when we get the NVIDIA news. Obviously, the Blackwell transition is going to be followed pretty closely. Any signs that the Blackwell ramp up could be stalling out would spook investors. So that's another key issue that we want to watch. Guidance naturally will be a big factor. Anything that's perceived as soft guidance, and we've certainly seen some more conservative outlooks from folks, would be something that would hit the stock. Now, Wall Street expects its Q1 revenues to increase sequentially to around 42 billion, again from the expected 38 billion in Q4. But there are some fears that potential constraints around Blackwell could impact that. We'll let Brandon cover the options here in a second. Now, taking a quick look at valuation, stock's currently trading at about 40 times forward PE on a non-GAAP basis. This is about 87% above the sector median. Of course, I think most people would argue that that's a well-deserved premium for the stock. Quick recap of the Q3 benchmark performances for NVIDIA. Revenues were up 93.6% to 35.08 billion. Data center revs, they were up 112% year over year and 17% sequentially. They're expected to come in around 34 billion this quarter. Gaming revenues increased by about 15% year over year, benefiting from strong sales of the GeoForce RTX 40 series. The professional visualization, that was up 17% year over year as well. And then auto, that saw a nice bounce back in Q3, jumping up 72% to provide a record for the quarter. So there's some of the things that we'll be looking at from NVIDIA. But what we're going to talk about with Brandon here is the options positioning and the technicals. So, Brandon, without further ado, why don't you break down what you're seeing on the options front?
Well, it's a tough act to follow. Sounds like you've done those earnings reports once or twice. So
Once or twice.
I will do my best now. So
I'm not concerned about you.
so one besides the obvious that we all got a lot of eyeballs on NVIDIA. Kind of what prompted this was read an article over the weekend titled "NVIDIA Options Traders Are Vastly Overestimating How Earnings Will Move the Stock. Just look at these charts." And this is actually an opinion piece by Lawrence McMillan. Probably a lot out there recognize him. He's known as the author that wrote the book that many refer to as the Bible of options trading. So, I figured the guy that was writing the Bible might have something good to say, and thought it might be worth a discussion here. So, basically, what he was saying is NVIDIA options aren't a good trade. So, he was saying that they are somewhat
Any of them.
expensive. Yeah, I mean, he goes into the straddle trade that we
Okay.
go into, but they're kind of all interlooped, all the different math and strategies. So I would say yes overall, but he was referencing the straddle that we'll go through here. So yeah, he said NVIDIA options are somewhat expensive heading into the company's earnings. So, specifically the price of the at the money straddle. So again, you'd just be talking about the call price plus the put price is the market's estimate of the size of the move that is going to take place after the earnings announcement. And we've talked about this a little bit in past presentations, but that's just your basic math calculation of the estimate of what a stock's going to do. Personally, I just like to cheat, so I don't have to do more math, and I just go to the OPTNX ticker symbol that Carmine puts the information on, and there's a nice little cheat sheet there for everything. So that's personally what I do at this point.
Hey, I mean, why recreate the wheel, right?
We got to do enough math. I got candles flying around and talking about Marabozos and hammers all the time. It's like, if somebody else can do it for me, I'm just going to let
That's
them.
the whole point of providing a trading service, right?
Exactly. So, um, so yeah, the NVIDIA pre-earnings straddle, he said, has been overpriced. So that is just priced higher than the ensuing move in 5 of the past 6 quarters. So I looked last night and I looked again, I don't know, an hour or two ago, and it was pricing in about a 10% move. And actually, when he wrote this, which was last week, it was around a 9% move. So it's actually a bit lower than recent quarters, but still relatively high for NVIDIA. NVIDIA usually has about a 61% call to 39% put split average on just a regular basis. So this is actually about what we have seen over the last 10 days. So yeah, again, not seeing a huge tilt in either direction. And the options market is not necessarily giving us a crystal ball on kind of where the stock might go. Again, it never has a crystal ball, but I talk about some of those call sizzle indexes and put call ratios that reach extreme levels. Just not really seeing that here. Again, I want to say it was like an hour or two ago, and we were at about 55% calls to puts. So, a little bit more skewed towards the put side on an average basis. I'm not really reading into that small of an amount based upon the fact that it's just the whole market's been down today and, NVIDIA's under pressure. So I'm kind of looking at it a little bit that way. But yeah, again, just at this moment, and I'll check it again tomorrow, like I'm sure a lot of people will, and try to provide any updates on what I see. But kind of right now, just not really seeing one glaring direction.
So does that, in your opinion, set up for just kind of a chop between, say, 125 to 135? Is that kind of how you're seeing things playing out based on what you're reading from the options?
Well, I mean, that would be that would bring you into your diamonds and furs that you miss out on, right? If you're one of those market makers. If the options are more expensive than usual, everybody's expecting some sort of big move in either direction. You draw people in at the high premium and then you chop it around. Now, this report just does seem to me like there's just so many more eyeballs on it than even usual for NVIDIA, and so many what ifs on just the deep seek thing. And obviously we've had some volatility, some signs of cracking in the bull market. So again, all those things add up to a potential scenario for fireworks. But yeah, I mean, if the market makers, if an earnings report comes out and the stock goes up 1%, they're having champagne that night. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be the worst thing for them.
Now, one of the things that you also talked to is about the short VIX gamma that's included here on the NVIDIA options trading. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so switching over to a couple of other articles that I read, it was just kind of talking about some of the VIX call options activity. So last week, the ratio of outstanding VIX call options relative to puts neared its highest level since September 2023. So on Tuesday, the call option volume even hit 1 million. And I guess within that, there were 2 block trades on Tuesday where 250,000 call options were bought. So, Yeah, I would say that 250,000 would probably be a pretty big trader, potentially prepping for some sort of some volatility. So the most traded contracts were the strikes of 24 and 25 expiring in March. So we could probably list several other things to include in that time frame, but that would include NVIDIA earnings. You've got the 1 month delay of tariffs that is almost due here. That would include a Fed decision and also a possible government shutdown. So, people definitely out there trying to buy protection in the last week with a couple of potential of headline grabbing market making moves on the horizon.
Well, obviously, we're going to have the budget resolution. That's March 14th, current date right now. So they'll be dealing with a lot of those headlines. Um, Tariffs obviously still loom there. We've kicked the can down the road a few times on them. We'll see if we could get enough to continue to push that back. It doesn't seem like that's a threat that President Trump wants to ever put to bed, though, right? So, the market does seem to be kind of working its way through the tariff headlines, at least at this juncture. Would be another Fed meeting, of course, as well in the middle of March, right? So, if you had those stagflation concerns going, that could be something that could get amplified, of course. So there are a few things that are going to be at play going in, which could help suggest some of the price action that you're seeing in some of the movements towards those 24 and 25 strikes expiring in March. So all factors to be in there, to be calculated in the equation, right? So let me ask you then, Brandon, as we prepare for NVIDIA, how would you play it? Now, obviously, not looking for you to make a call in front of earnings, but we will run a poll out, and we'll talk a little bit about the expectations. I know JJ was asking, is it a given that it's just going to be a sell the news? The one thing that I'd probably implore more than anything around earnings is nothing's ever a given. You never know what's going to pop out from it. I mean, for all we know, NVIDIA could be getting ready to post a complete monster blowout quarter, and that has to get factored in and change the equation a little bit. But Brandon, what are some of the moves that you'd be wanting to see based around? And I'll give you a couple scenarios. All right. So, and I'll run a poll too, like I said, about these scenarios. Let's say NVIDIA does blow out expectations and provide and raises its guidance well above expectations. What do you think the stock would do, and what would be some of the things that you'd be looking for?
Well, I think that they would probably blow right through that recent pullback, right? And I don't know. You've got some new shorts in there, probably both in the stock and in the market, and that would cause some covering, right? I mean, a move up to 150 is not unheard of in that scenario. What are we talking there for a move? Well, that's 17%. Maybe not the day after, but I think sooner rather than later, that would seem like a pretty reasonable scenario if they blew it out and gave some great. I think they need to give some great guidance, right?
Yeah, yeah, which is probably the biggest risk I would think for bulls, just because nobody's really putting their neck out at this juncture, right? So there's no need for them to do that. But I'm just throwing out scenarios, like I said. Um, so let's talk about that scenario then. Big beat, but guidance is pedestrian, in line, slightly light.
I think they get hit. Um,
I would
you
think
know,
so
I
too.
I think it's just going to be so focused on the future and the commentary of Microsoft. Yeah, I don't know, slowing down on their spending. I don't know. We'll see how much of a slowdown it is because they said that they're still going to spend that much, just kind of maybe adjust. So I think that the spending's still going to be there. It's just such a high bar, and some of the other fear that's creeping into the market with the consumer sentiment, tariffs, all that stuff, wars over in Europe, all that unfortunate stuff too. So, I think it needs to be some pretty solid guidance for them because they've also just been such a growth machine for so long that nobody ever wants to see the growth machine run out. And that's when people start to really panic, I think. And again, I, I say
Are there
growth
any puts?
machine.
Are there any puts you'd look at in that scenario, or is it really just zero interest on your part to trade any of it?
Oh, I won't touch a NVIDIA trade.
Yeah,
For me, it would be more of, I would maybe take like a side play on like a Taiwan semi. Again, your options on that, just because it is a different stock, are going to probably be slightly cheaper, just because it's not the direct play, but they're still going to be elevated. It's not like Wall Street doesn't know, like, oh, Taiwan Semi and Nvidia are connected, like that
right.
that works into the prices. But just since we're talking scenarios here, and talking about the growth machine, just to clarify that point, I always laugh about this article from this was several quarters ago. When Snowflake was such a darling and their growth was huge, and they had put up like 125% revenue growth in the quarter, and it was expected to be like 127%. And the headline was like, the growth is over at Snowflake. Like, well, I've owned a business before, and I sure as hell would have loved 100% revenue growth in a quarter. So, um, but again, they'll stick to that headline. So that's what I mean by growth machine. They're still growing solidly, but it needs to be big. For Nvidia, if I were to play something like that, my assumption would be that it would roll over back at least to that 115 area, kind of the
Yeah.
recent lows from the beginning of the month. So, I would probably be, and again, it's pricing in like a 10% move here. So, what are we talking? So, yeah, I mean, the 10% move would kind of take you down to the, 115-ish level. And you probably no surprises. That's one of the more heavily traded put contracts today. So, um, yeah, I'd probably do that. And one thing that I might consider is, maybe even going out a week or two on the expiration. Your options are going to be just a little bit cheaper because, again, your near-term options around earnings are going to be the most expensive. And I might maybe consider going out a week and looking at like the 110s. Maybe with the assumption that it rolls back over to that 115 area after the earnings, you get your 10% move. And because there's presumably so much fear of a downturn that it starts to make its way back to the 100 level. And, I'd maybe look at like the 115, the 110 strike in anticipation of that move.
All right. So there's a few thoughts to have in your head. Again, I will roll out a poll here in a little bit, and we'll try to get a sense of where traders sit on the desk. But for now, I think that will do it for us, Brandon, unless you got anything else to add to the combo
There
right
was
now.
just one more quick
Sure.
comment here, going back to the VIX trade. So some of the commentary I read in those articles was it seems as though this VIX call buying activity is actually putting a little pressure on the options dealers as it puts them, and this is a quote, extremely short VIX gamma. Now, I think the market makers, when they're writing VIX contracts, have a pretty good idea of that. They're not going to necessarily get caught off guard as much as maybe like a GameStop move. But if we do start to see a move towards those strikes, the 24, 25s, as we get closer to expiration, it does seem as though it could add additional fuel to the fire, just because they'd have to manage and cover those positions. So Yeah, I think that's kind of one area to keep on the VIX, where if we start to get to those levels, that one, the market will have presumably turned down even more. Some of that will probably be a result of NVIDIA, and that there could be a little bit of some, derivative stuff lingering in the background that could maybe add a little fuel to the fire. So, you know, for me, when I see something like that, I kind of just give myself a little mental check of like, hey, if the market's really sliding lower, maybe wait for that one extra, reversal candle before jumping in, just because, it might be a little bit more extreme than usual.
All right. Well, there you have it. We'll be watching this dynamic and see how it plays out. Certainly keeping a close eye on NVIDIA the next couple of days, as we pretty much do every day. So, Golden Shoe, he's throwing out a cashless collar there. Brandon selling the NVIDIA 165 calls and buying the 104 puts. So, if you have any thoughts on that, you can respond to Golden Shoe in the room. This is the Junes that he's looking at.
Yeah, I'll have
So,
to just take a look. I know that Golden Shoe does a lot on the cashless collars side of things, so I know those trades have worked out pretty well in the past. Yeah, I mean, any sort of time you can do any sort of play on the stock that's, not going to cost you much, or you know, cost you very little for any sort of protection. I definitely am usually not opposed to those strategies.
all right. There you have it. So, okay. Again, we'll be keeping a close eye out on this. We'll be following up. Brandon's always in the room, as you know, and I'm sure he'll be commenting as well. So, looking forward to that. So, just getting hit to Brandon for a heads up from Barron's. The headline: NVIDIA's earnings could be bad. How to protect your portfolio. So, keep an eye out for that story too, as it promises to remain a hot topic.
Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, and
All
again, I
right. Well,
guess.
Brandon,
Well,
thanks as per usual for joining us here.
all right, thank you, Gavin. I appreciate it, and I'll
What's
put
up?
that check in the mail for taking you away from the trading.
It's okay. That's okay. We have been slipping lower, but we shall survive. So, hey, Brandon, thanks again. We'll be posting this recording in a little bit. If anybody's got any follow-up questions for Brandon, feel free to hit him up in the room for sure.